The studio lights of The View blazed as cameras rolled. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro, known for his rapid-fire arguments and incisive analysis, leaned slightly forward at the panel table, his eyes fixed on his newest guest. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen sat across from him, calm, poised, wrapped in a light-colored suit, a subtle lapel pin glinting just below his collar. He had been invited to speak about youth and purpose. What the producers didn't expect was the profound shift in tone he was about to bring. Sunny host adjusted her cards. Joy Behar cleared her throat. Ben Shapiro raised an eyebrow and broke the tension with a direct tone. So, Mao, pastor, television preacher, and businessman, you preach a message of unlimited potential and blessing, right? Yes. Political commentator and media host, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen replied with ease. The kind of potential that remembers its divine purpose. The audience gave a polite clap, but the undertone was already shifting. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro crossed his arms. You mean the kind that often glosses over systemic issues? That prioritizes feel-good narratives over hard solutions? I mean the kind that doesn't confuse a critical analysis with a blueprint for despair. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen countered smoothly. Gasps echoed. Even the cameraman paused. Then came the moment. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro leaned in, face firm, voice sharp. Pastor, television preacher, I'm a businessman. Messages like yours, while well-intentioned, often lack the intellectual rigor needed to address America's real challenges. The studio fell silent. Even Joy Behar went still. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't flinch. He looked straight at political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro, lowered his mic slightly, and said, and host, political commentator and media host, messages like yours, while intellectually rigorous, sometimes forget the spirit that binds us all. A single gasp turned into scattered applause. The producers panicked. The control room lit up with red flashes. Go to commercial, someone whispered, but it was too late. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen turned back to political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro with a gentle but firm resolve. Political commentator and media host, you've had decades to dissect the problems. Now let me share the hope, and this time, America's listening. The audience erupted online. The clip hit X in under 5 minutes. The hashtag Joel Osteen on The View was born, and the war of ideas was just beginning. When the show returned from commercial break, the air in The View studio was electric. The panel had shifted in their chairs. The control room warned producers to calm it down. But the internet had already decided this was no longer a typical daytime segment. This was a televised clash of ideologies. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen sat tall, chin lifted, eyes locked on political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro. The subtle glow of his lapel pin contrasted with the calm assurance in his voice. He had grown up watching the show from a modest living room in Houston. He knew the format. He knew political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's rhythm, but he wasn't here to play along. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro tried to laugh it off. Oh, pastor, television preacher, and businessman, I've had more logical debates than you've had televised sermons. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't smile. Maybe, but you've spent those years talking at the intellect, not to the heart. The crowd stirred, caught between amusement and anticipation. Joy Behar cut in with a dismissive wave. So what? Now you're the voice of spiritual awakening? Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't look her way. I'm the voice of the people who don't sit on stages like this. People who seek inner peace beyond political victories. People who don't get applause for constantly identifying flaws every morning. That line hit like a lightning bolt. A few claps, a couple of shocked gasps. Sunny Hostin leaned forward, trying to steer things back. But pastor, television preacher, and businessman, don't you think progress involves rigorous critique, speaking out against illogical arguments? Absolutely. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen answered smoothly. But rigorous critique isn't the same as dwelling on negativity, and too many people in this room have forgotten the difference between analysis and inspiration. All eyes turned back to political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro. He smiled tightly. You've got feel-good platitudes. That doesn't mean you've got answers. I don't offer platitudes, I offer perspective. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen said, almost whispering. I remember where I came from. My father worked tirelessly building his ministry. My mother prayed silently through every challenge. That's where I learned what true resilience looks like. Not just dissecting problems, but believing in solutions. The crowd went quiet. No applause, just listening. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro tried again. That's not unique, pastor, television preacher, and businessman. Everyone's got a story of overcoming. Then why do you only elevate the ones that fit a narrative of conflict? Boom, Twitter exploded. He said that on The View, read one trending post. Tagged Osteen-Shapiro clash started climbing charts. Reaction videos were already going up. Back in the studio, the silence gave way to tension again. You talk over everyone else. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen said calmly, but not me. Backstage, a producer whispered into political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's earpiece, urging him to shift topics, lighten the tone. But political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro wasn't backing down. His pride, his legacy as a debater, and his brand were on the line. This wasn't just an argument now, it was personal. He sat forward, eyes narrowed. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman, you sit here promoting a message that sometimes seems to dismiss the tangible struggles, the policy failures, the real-world injustices. Don't simplify the complex. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't flinch. His tone sharpened like a surgeon's scalpel. You mean a message that inspires people to rise above circumstances, to find strength in faith, to contribute positively to their communities? You call that simplifying? I call that empowering what years of negativity have tried to diminish. The audience buzzed with mixed reaction. Joy Behar raised her brows, half amused. Sunny Hostin shifted uncomfortably, but political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro doubled down. We give voice to the logical, the empirical. You offer spiritual comfort instead of concrete solutions. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen pulled out a small, well-worn Bible from his suit jacket pocket, smooth and deliberate. He held it up for the camera. You want to talk about concrete solutions? Here are countless stories of individuals finding transformation, overcoming addiction, rebuilding families, bringing light into darkness. Your analysis focuses on what's broken. My message focuses on what can be restored. And what about the story of the inner city youth program, inspired by faith, that was mocked on certain news segments last year because it didn't fit a particular secular narrative of progress? Why was their success downplayed? The screen behind them lit up. Clips of a struggling youth program, then thriving after receiving faith-based support, cut mid-sentence with dismissive news commentary, flashing briefly before the control room yanked the feed. But the damage was done. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's mouth tightened. You don't understand journalistic editorial standards. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman. No, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen shot back. I understand editorial agendas that prefer problems to praise. Twitter exploded again. Osteen brought Bible on The View. Shapiro's face when. OMG, Joel's not playing. He came with the word. Even Sunny, in a rare moment, sighed. Maybe we can agree things have gotten too focused on what divides us. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen nodded. Hope isn't naive unless you're used to controlling the narrative of cynicism. The audience clapped, tentative at first, then stronger. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro leaned back, visibly frustrated. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen closed the Bible, tucked it away, and smiled faintly. I'm not here for applause. I'm here to remind people that the power of belief still matters, even if it's uncomfortable for some to intellectualize. And for the first time, political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro didn't have a comeback. The silence on set felt longer than it was. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro cleared his throat, clearly regrouping. You know, pastor, television preacher, and businessman, I've been in this game a long time. You don't know what it's like to logically dismantle erroneous arguments since the early 2000s. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't dismiss the weight of that statement. In fact, he nodded slowly. And I respected you for that. I still remember listening to your early podcast with aspiring debaters. You stood for something sharp and analytical. A pause. But what happened? Somewhere along the line, you stopped merely dissecting arguments and started defending certain intellectual fortresses, as long as they aligned with your preferred logic. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's jaw tightened. That's not fair, is it? Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's voice was steady, his tone controlled but surgical. You once challenged intellectual complacency. Now you defend the constant critique as the only path, even when it leads to a deficit of hope. The crowd was stunned. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro wasn't used to being analyzed this way, especially not live, especially not by someone who rarely engaged in direct debate. Joy tried to shift the tension. Gentlemen, let's remember this is a conversation, not a theological debate. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's eyes didn't move. Then stop trying to silence spiritual testimony. Boom! A younger audience member in the front row let out an audible amen. The camera caught it. Online, the meme machines went wild. Twitter lit up with side-by-side images of young Ben Shapiro debunking acclaim versus current Ben Shapiro, sitting behind the view desk, struggling to rebut. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen folded his hands. You paved the way, political commentator and media host, for intellectual rigor. But now perhaps you're blocking the path to spiritual and emotional fulfillment for those who need more than just facts. That sentence hit harder than anything before. The control room scrambled. Go wide shot. Delay camera 2. Cut mic if needed. He's going viral. We can't stop this now. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro tried to reclaim the floor. I've never blocked truth. I've sought it relentlessly. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen leaned in. Then stop acting like my truth. The truth of faith and hope doesn't count. For a moment, it was as if two generations stood on either side of the same battlefield. One forged in logical combat, the other forged in spiritual conviction. And only one was willing to gently but firmly reframe the entire script to speak from the heart. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's last line, then stop acting like my truth. The truth of faith and hope doesn't count, hung in the air like thunder after lightning. The studio audience was frozen, half in awe, half in disbelief. Even the normally chatty Joy Behar sat still, her pen tapping nervously against the table. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro finally spoke. Slower now. I've fought for logical clarity my whole life. I don't need to prove anything to someone who's only just arrived in this intellectual arena. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't blink. But that's the problem. Political commentator and media host, you've stopped proving it with compassion. You think legacy of logic replaces empathy? The audience stirred. Applause tried to build, but was smothered by tension. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen leaned slightly forward. Not aggressive, but unyielding. Let's talk facts. In 2018, you defended a controversial commentator's harsh rhetoric, dismissing the emotional impact on marginalized groups. You called it just facts. Do you remember that? The studio went cold. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's expression shifted. A rare look of frustration, bordering on discomfort, cracked his composure. That was taken out of context. I was defending freedom of speech. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen held his ground. Perhaps, but did you ever acknowledge the pain? Did you ever face the people who heard your words and felt dehumanized, not just logically refuted? Twitter lit up like a forest fire. Osteen just went there. Asked Shapiro speechless. The audience couldn't look away. You say I represent what's wrong with America. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen continued, voice tightening. But I stand here, a pastor, television preacher, and businessman defending faith, family, and the power of positive belief, while you sometimes protect intellectual purity even when it alienates those seeking simple human connection. The tension turned radioactive. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro opened his mouth, but no words came. Sunny Hostin touched her arm gently, as if to say, let it go. But pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen wasn't finished. This isn't about age or intellect or legacy. It's about truth, the truth of the human heart. You say you're a fighter, political commentator, and media host. So fight for hope. Own the responsibility of your influence and stop rewriting it when it gets uncomfortable to connect with people on a human level. A slow, stunned applause broke out. Even viewers at home could feel the shift. This wasn't an ambush. It was an invitation to a different kind of dialogue. And pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had just called for a new kind of accounting. Backstage, a junior producer turned to her supervisor. This just became the biggest episode of the year. The supervisor didn't answer. He was already on the phone with the network president. While the credits for The View hadn't even rolled yet, social media was already ablaze. On X, the hashtag Joel Osteen defends hope trended #1 within minutes. Reaction clips flooded TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. One specific line, "You paved the way," political commentator and media host, but now perhaps you're blocking the path to spiritual and emotional fulfillment, had already been meme-fied and stitched over powerful instrumental music. Fox News aired a breaking headline within the hour. Joel Osteen reframes the View debate, live, spirit-filled, and unwavering. CNN attempted to walk a careful line. Tense exchange between political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro and pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen goes viral. But online, the public wasn't interested in balance. They picked sides fast and loudly. In a cafe in Texas, a group of young aspiring leaders rewatched the moment on loop, yelling, "That's our pastor." In a Manhattan office, 2 liberal staffers whispered, "He really went for the spiritual jugular." And political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro didn't recover in the usual way. Backstage, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen stood alone near a water cooler, his hands still calm. Whether from deep conviction or peaceful focus, even he wasn't sure. His aide approached cautiously. Positive Life Network just invited you to prime time. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen looked down at his phone. Texts flooded in. One from his wife simply read, "Proud doesn't even cover it." Then came the text that made him pause. Call from a prominent tech CEO. He stepped into a quiet corner and picked up. "Pastor Osteen," his familiar voice rang out, "you just did what no one else has managed. You showed the media's intellectual fortress that there's a different kind of strength and made America listen. Thank you." "I didn't plan it like this," pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen replied. "Doesn't matter. You were ready, and now they know you're not just a preacher. You're a beacon of hope." As he hung up, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen felt something shift. Not just in the studio, but in his entire public trajectory. He had entered The View as a guest. He left as a national voice for a renewed sense of purpose. Meanwhile, political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro sat quietly in his dressing room. His team buzzed around him, publicists scrambling, PR statements drafted. He stared at the mirror. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure if his arguments were still resonating as powerfully. By the time pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen walked out of the View studio and into the bright Manhattan sunlight, he was no longer just a guest who sparred with a host. He had become a catalyst, a spiritual lightning rod, a name that was suddenly being whispered in green rooms, shouted in living rooms, and plastered across every major media outlet in America. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since he left the building. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro posted a 5-minute breakdown. Osteen didn't just stand up to the usual critique. He sidestepped it, offering an alternative narrative that, while not strictly logical, resonated with many. This is what spiritual resilience looks like. Candace Owens tweeted, "Joel Osteen just preached down an entire wall of cynicism. We've been waiting for this message." But it wasn't just the conservative side that reacted. MSNBC ran a panel calling pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's approach calm conviction wrapped in charm, warning that his style was dangerously effective at bypassing rational debate. And for political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro, he issued a vague response via his publicist. Mr. Shapiro stands by his commitment to intellectual honesty and rigorous discourse. He appreciates the spirited conversation. The statement didn't land. In fact, it sounded hollow because America had seen the full exchange. They watched a pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen, calmly but iron-willed, hold his ground, not with shouting, but with powerful messages of faith. Messages a political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro had no purely logical counter for. That night, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen was booked on a major spiritual network, facing a renowned interviewer. He wore the same light suit, the subtle lapel pins still gleaming at his collar. His posture was straight, his voice measured, but the fire of conviction hadn't dimmed. "I wasn't trying to go viral," he said, "but I won't apologize for defending hope, especially when others try to diminish it." The interviewer leaned forward, a genuine smile. "You didn't just defend it, you owned that spiritual space." Clips of pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen on The View played beside him as the segment aired. In real time, his follower count exploded, tens of thousands pouring in. Meanwhile, on TikTok, a new trend had started. Young people, many of them seeking meaning, posting selfies with captions like, "I don't argue logic, I do what Joel did. Hope up, negativity out." Joel's courage. The movement had begun, but so had the backlash. A trending piece on the Daily Beast accused pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen of being a puppet for feel-good capitalism. Others called him a prosperity gospel stunt, but none could deny he had struck a nerve that reached far beyond the studio lights. Even Saturday Night Live scrambled to rewrite their opening sketch for the weekend. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen was now a household name. In his hotel room, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen stood by the window overlooking the city. The view was stunning, but what lay ahead of him was far more compelling. He wasn't just countering political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro. He was countering an entire system of media echo chambers that prioritized division and critique. And for the first time, he knew he could win, not with anger, but with unwavering faith. The next morning, the New York Times ran a front-page story with a single-word headline, "Unshaken." Beneath it, a still image from The View. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen leaning forward, his hand raised slightly, his expression unwavering. Across the table, political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro frozen mid-blink, caught between logical response and spiritual retreat. Inside the article, critics and supporters alike dissected what had happened. But one thing was agreed upon. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had changed the rules of political TV forever. It wasn't just what he said, a media analyst wrote. It's how he said it. Calm, precise, profoundly human. It wasn't chaos, it was conviction. By noon, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had received invitations to appear on the Joe Rogan Experience, Real Time with Bill Maher, and The Breakfast Club. 3 totally different worlds, yet all suddenly curious about this pastor, television preacher, and businessman who had flipped the table on daytime royalty with a message of hope. His team sat in the conference room of his temporary Manhattan office, the TV muted but flashing his name repeatedly. "They want you in LA by Friday," his comms director said. "You're leading every headline." Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen looked calm, but his mind raced. He wasn't interested in a publicity tour. He wanted to use this moment for something bigger. He turned to his team. "I don't want this to be about clout. I want it to be about conviction. Let's launch something, a campaign, a platform." And that's how #SpeakHope was born. That same day, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen posted a video from his hotel balcony, dressed in a simple, light suit with the wind tugging at his hair. "I stood up because I was tired of watching negativity get twisted. But this isn't just my fight. It's yours too. If you've ever been shouted down for your beliefs, silenced because your story didn't fit the script of despair, this is for you. Speak up. Speak hope." The video hit 10 million views in 24 hours. Across the country, young people, many of them seeking meaning, shared their own short videos, finishing pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's message with their personal stories. "My teacher told me faith didn't belong in schools. I stayed quiet. Not anymore. They laughed when I said I supported community outreach through churches. They don't laugh now. They said believing in blessings made me naive. I say it made me strong." The hashtag exploded. #SpeakHope, guess Joel was right. Truth doesn't shout, it reassures. Even public figures who normally avoided politics posted messages of support. Country singer Kelsey James tweeted, "Didn't know who Joel was before. Now I'd listen to him every morning." Meanwhile, in his dressing room at ABC Studios, political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro stared at the screen as clip after clip rolled. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's face, his voice, his moment. He didn't say anything, just reached for a glass of water, his fingers tapping slightly. His co-host Joy walked in. They're calling it the media's spiritual awakening of the year, she said dryly. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro didn't smile. He turned to the mirror, adjusted his tie, and whispered to himself, "This isn't over." But deep down, he knew something had shifted, not just in the conversation, but in the culture. And pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen was now the voice millions wanted to follow. 2 days after pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's showdown with political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro, the halls of Capitol Hill were anything but calm. In a closed-door meeting room, a group of senior Democratic strategists gathered, grim expressions on their faces as they watched a loop of The View exchange on a mounted screen. "He went after Shapiro's logic like a spiritual guide," one of them muttered. And the worst part? He was so calm. People responded. Across the aisle, the mood couldn't be more different. In a conference room and at a prominent conservative think tank, applause erupted as pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's clip played for the 5th time. His line, "You paved the way," political commentator and media host. But now perhaps you're blocking the path to spiritual and emotional fulfillment, had become a rallying cry. He's not just a pastor's voice, a strategist grinned. He's Gen Z's answer to intellectual elitism. Calls came pouring into conservative lawmakers' offices. Donors pledged thousands within hours. Even veteran senators whispered to aides, "Keep an eye on him. He's more than just a television preacher." Back in New York, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's temporary team worked around the clock. They were no longer organizing media appearances. They were organizing momentum. He met with a group of college students from various campuses, and one question changed everything. How do we fight back when they tell us our faith isn't logical? Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's answer was simple. You don't fight logic with anger. You respond with the power of conviction. That night, #SpeakHope surged again. A viral video showed pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen outside a university campus talking to students. No teleprompter, no filter. You want to know why they mock us? Because our hope challenges their cynicism. We don't chant, we offer solutions from the heart. We don't just follow, we inspire. Mainstream networks scrambled. ABC, under pressure from internal divisions, issued a clarification on the View exchange. While we support spirited conversation, we regret that tensions overshadowed respectful dialogue. Translation: damage control. But the damage was already done, just not the way they thought. Political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro's aura of untouchable logic had cracked. Not shattered, but definitely bruised. Meanwhile, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen received a call from an unexpected source, Elon Musk. "Just wanted to say," he chuckled, "that was incredibly efficient. Not many people managed to shift an entire narrative in 6 minutes with such calm." "I didn't mean to dismantle anything," he replied, "just to share an alternative." "Well," he said, "you were loud and clear." To pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen hung up, his mind racing. He never sought to be a disruptor, but now that he had become one, he knew the responsibility was bigger than his ambition. In his hotel, he paced the room, his wife watching from the couch. "You think you started something you can't stop?" she asked gently. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen looked out the window, Manhattan's lights blinking like a grid of restless thoughts. "No," he said quietly, "I think I started something they can't stop." The day of pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen's keynote arrived. The venue, a massive civic auditorium, the crowd overflowing, students, veterans, working-class moms, media, skeptics. The atmosphere electric. As he stepped onto the sleek stage under a massive banner proclaiming "Hope for America," camera shutters clicked like rain on glass. He wore navy again, but this time paired with a soft gold tie and his signature lapel pin gleaming at his collar. He didn't carry notes. He didn't need them. 3 days ago, someone told me I represent a message that lacks intellectual rigor. A pause. The crowd leaned in. "I disagree. What's wrong with America is thinking that only certain forms of discourse matter, that only the loudest logical arguments deserve to be heard, that if you didn't grow up in academic halls or media punditry, your truth is somehow second-rate." Scattered applause built into clapping. A young woman in the front wiped away a tear. When I stood on that stage with political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro, I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted to share a message of hope. But I realized for many of us, sharing our hope is winning because we've been shut out of the conversation for too long. I'm not here to erase intellectual debate. I'm here to make sure faith and inspiration count too. A beat of silence. We can disagree. We can even challenge each other. But don't you dare say I don't understand struggle because I wear a nice suit or I believe in divine favor. My parents lived with unwavering faith through adversity. I worked tirelessly to build a ministry that serves millions. I've fought my way into every room I've ever entered, not with aggression, but with grace and persistence. The applause surged. They called me a businessman. They said I was too positive, too spiritual, too focused on blessings. And maybe I am all of those things, but I'm not afraid because hope doesn't need to shout. It just needs to stand. Thunderous applause erupted. Some stood, others wept. Reporters typed furiously. And in a small apartment in Los Angeles, even political commentator and media host Ben Shapiro watched in silence. No commentary this time, just thought. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen stepped down from the podium slowly, his wife waiting at the edge of the stage, hand outstretched. He took it. Behind him, the banner now read, not just Hope for America, it read, a voice that inspires. Later that night, Joel Osteen 2024 trended globally. Supporters called for him to run for office or lead a national spiritual revival. News anchors called it a defining moment in spiritual conservatism, and critics had no playbook for what they just witnessed. This wasn't just a story about media. It was about impact, voice, legacy, and who gets to define what truly matters. And pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen had proven he didn't need permission to hold the pen of inspiration. Some people just talk, but some, when they speak, the world listens for a different kind of truth. In this story, pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen didn't just respond. He drew a line in the sand of cynicism, faith, hope, and unwavering positivity. It might sound cliche, but those three words can reframe a media giant. And today, that's exactly what we witnessed. A pastor, television preacher, and businessman standing up for what he believes in. Pastor, television preacher, and businessman Joel Osteen reminded us, silence isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's surrender to negativity, but one sentence spoken with conviction can become the voice of millions. If this story moved you, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because here at Dreamvale Narratives, every story reveals a deeper truth. See you in the next episode.